I didn't get into this guy until after Roxanne Pulitzer because we were both doing the same thing during the earlier years. This is the man who carries the illness forward for all of us. Thank God, into the fray and into the fire. Always wearing the right coat while traveling outside the realms of possibilities.
I do not remember the first time I read Hunter Thompson. It was sort of like a demented spiritual experience. It's no white light, just shit, that's it. Hunter Thompson.
An apple a day keeps the doctor away, right? I am the doctor. I took one look out here and saw fear. I don't know, how about, how would you feel being the last dope fiend? There's an old civil rights axiom that the weakest link in any civil rights case is always the defendant. Yeah, imagine being a lawyer and getting a call from me. That's why I try to behave myself. And I advise the same to you, all of you. Well, that's good advice. This is, after all, a really aggressively Calvinist period. Let me offer my condolences to all of you in this generation that will have to grow up, live all your lives with the idea that sex is death and that the rain is poison. And now they have the sun will give you cancer. And now the Surgeon General is going to tell us that he will get down to things like mead and near beer. Yeah, it isn't the law that bothers you so much. It's being chased around and scorned by your ex-peers. And Jesus, I would have to run, scurry like a rat from place to place. I can't afford to feel guilty, and I don't really think I am. But for some reason, I have lived for 26 years without a job and 25 without sleep. I've never claimed to be anything but a nice guy and an athlete. And that's true. I'm a judicious user of drugs. Now keep in mind that I'm a doctor. And plus I am one of the highest living authorities on that subject. Well, who else? They're all dead. Shit. Well, if anybody had any DMT right now, I think I would share it with you. Somebody described it to me once as like acid, except that it's so compressed, it's like being shot out of a cannon for 45 minutes. Bush has all of his life and all of his career made a pretty successful career of sort of minding the store. He has been a congressman, ambassador to China, ambassador to the UN, CIA, vice president, and now president. That's a pretty good record. Only Richard Nixon surpasses it. Well, here we're talking about two of the most criminal, outside of Warren Harding and Ulysses Grant. Yeah, and Charles Manson. We're talking about serious criminals. This is a good, what do you call it, an enduring criminal conspiracy or a continuing criminal conspiracy. It would, when the great scorer comes to rate against these names, George Bush, Nixon, Warren Harding, Grant will all be up there. And yet they both, in this century, Bush and Nixon have held almost every office that could be coveted by ambitious politicians or all-American boys. Nixon was everything except the governor of California. Oh boy, that's a point of pride for everybody. Yeah, Nixon was on paper one of the most successful politicians in the history of the country. Now Ronald Reagan, he only ran for 2 offices. Reagan really blitzed it. He was like Roy Rogers. Yeah, we'll see Reagan about 40 years from now with weird plastic all over him. And here's an actor out of Hollywood who was elected with the help of 3 or 4 used car dealers, and is a 2-term governor of California, campaigning against debt, against the insane, against mental health, against almost everything, but mainly on an economic program of austerity and balancing the budget. The bastard left this state, I think, what was it, 6 times the debt. Then he runs for president. After that 2 terms here, he runs for president. And then that master appoints his successor. Now, nobody's ever done that. Yeah, his underling, his boy, his capon. People are not beaten up anymore. I think Bush is right. This is a kinder, gentler nation of sheep. It's all been said before.
Roosevelt proved you could be president forever, and Truman proved anybody could be president, and Eisenhower proved we didn't need one, and Kennedy and Johnson proved it was better not to have one. Nixon killed the presidency, and Ford embalmed it, and Jimmy Carter buried it, and Ronald was proving there's life after death. And I think Bush, you'll have to say, is an incarnation, a reincarnation of something, I don't know, or someone. I don't think the students today are indifferent. I think in the 50s you did have real kind of political apathy. I think right now the situation on campus is about the same as that in the general population, one of sort of confusion and uncertainty of not either knowing what to do, or if you think you do, of not knowing how to do it, how to get it going. I think that I tell students and faculty that I think that they have much more responsibility to do something now than was true in the 60s, when it was easy to proceed. You know, when the action was there, you didn't have to be very scholarly about it or academic, but now you do, and that that's where the leadership should come from. To expect the politicians to take the lead is expecting too much, but the academics, it seems to me, ought to be demonstrating their true function as critics of societies and at least as intellectual leaders, and I don't think they're doing it. There was a whole buildup of pressures that were bound to break loose sometime in the 60s. Some of them could have been alleviated in the Eisenhower administration, and some things could have been done early in the Kennedy administration, but they were postponed until it all sort of came together. The civil rights fight, then you had the addition of the war in Vietnam, which put additional pressure on students, and I think a kind of a coming together of resistance to being exploited. It was the first sign, I think, was when women refused to wear long coats, when fashion said they had to do it, and the students picked it up, and it was the period of honest blue jeans before the designer guys got into it. A kind of general protest against arbitrary authority, whether it was on the campus or whether it was parental or whether it was the fashion people or whether it was the government saying you got to fight this war. I am more concerned about the loss of liberty to bureaucracies which seem to be respectable, and I suggest to liberals that this is where they ought to be looking instead of worrying about every court decision. And the three bureaucracies that I see as most threatening are the Internal Revenue Service, which has no respect for the Bill of Rights. I mean, you could put a sign over the IRS office and say, abandon the Bill of Rights, you who enter here. No privacy, no due process. You're guilty until you prove your own innocence. Almost every guarantee in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution is violated in the proceedings of the IRS. And it isn't just the violations, but when you allow a major government agency to violate something like the Bill of Rights, it's infectious. It spreads from there to other agencies. They say, well, if the IRS can do it, so can we do it. Second agency is the Federal Election Commission, which has arbitrary power to interfere with the process by which the government is chosen. And it, too, violates due process and equal protection and freedom of assembly and privacy. And the third, potentially dangerous, is the Federal Communications Commission and the measure of power which it has potentially over news and education, entertainment, the whole media process of giving information and of influencing culture. That these, in my mind, are three agencies or departments of government which ought to be watched much more carefully than they are. We had a big move for censorship under the Eisenhower administration. It seems to come with kind of passive Republican administrations when people have nothing to do but kind of worry about defending themselves from everything. And at that time, the move was to ban the use of the mails for what they called obscene material. And the first list of obscene books included Lady Chatterley's Lover, which everybody had forgotten about. It was a great revival of it, and also Lysistrata, or the Trojan Women. And Summerfield was Postmaster General. When somebody told him that the Trojan women was 2,000 years old, he said, well, if the pornography is that old, why, it's all right. You can send that through the mail. And eventually it sort of faded out. And I think that what you got going now will also fade. Give the politicians and the people something more serious to think about. These sort of side issues tend to dissipate. At least I hope they will. I've sort of feel kind of sorry I'm out of politics. If you could say I'm going to be in it for 20 years. Like when I came in 48, we had civil rights. We had a whole program. I think that right now there's an opening for a significant program that would sort of take care of most of America's problems, but make us a real force in the world again, which we aren't now. We can't even respond to Central Europe because we're so broke, and we shouldn't be. And we don't control our own money. We haven't controlled our own foreign policy. We don't control our own borders, so that how are we going to move affirmatively in other areas where there's disorder when we're really in a sort of chaos at home?
No phenomenon in recent times, not even racism or the Vietnam War protest movement, has so intimidated the establishment press, who insist their reticence on the subject is journalistic caution. AIDS is an abstract, handled, with few commendable exceptions, by reporters and editors with rubber gloves on. Mainstream AIDS reporting is almost invariably a faithful recital of government research findings and party lines. All the more incredible when you consider how many times this medical community has reversed itself on AIDS. If the press had been as cautious covering Watergate, Nixon would still be president. Like small children discovering a dead animal, the press approach AIDS gingerly, prod it with a stick and jump back squealing because they saw it move, watching it very still from a safe distance. The press is not going to take any chances on new theories and radical therapies. Coverage of that is almost exclusively limited to looking down long, snooty noses, which is absurd. Writing about a potential treatment, however unconventional, isn't going to hurt anyone or anything, but will provide the essential oxygen of public debate. With AIDS, we're dealing with the largely unknown, yet we're squeamish about the unfamiliar. As long as reporting is responsible and the public is shown the distinction between theory and accepted fact, there is no reason why it can't also be bold, risk-taking, especially when the situation is this critical, and the biggest risk a news organization runs is of being momentarily wrong, possibly momentarily embarrassed. The press's natural pride and vanity is that it believes it champions the values of a democratic society, and that it serves as a sort of archangel guarding civilization. If you read the gay press, you get a sense of the desperation and anguish felt by that community about what is still being pigeonholed as essentially their problem. In the multitudinous articles about alternative therapies and conspiracy theories, you see and feel the maniacal hope. The gay press is sometimes like an hysterical accident victim. The mainstream press needs to be more sober than that, but brave enough to at least look. Until it is, its fantasy of itself as our champion is a self-delusion, and a desertion of us when we need it most. In the final sunburst of his presidency, Reagan gave a number of self-congratulatory speeches in which he proclaimed, enigmatically, "We did it." Did what? Traded away America's future, exiling it into the phantom zone of unimaginable debt? Successfully ignored the AIDS epidemic for 7 out of 8 years? Presided over a nation that has grown acceleratingly illiterate, drug-addicted and murderous? Seen the nation's homeless population grow larger than the population of some entire countries? Presided over the banishment of books from the classroom and the attempt to bring back a Puritan morality naturally outgrown 300 years ago? Which accomplishment shall we applaud first? "We did it" will be this decade's epitaph.
The message is very simple. Think for yourself and question authority.
It's interesting about the 60s revolution, cultural revolution, which then moved to Europe in the 70s when Franco died and when Salazar, in Portugal died, one after one, as these tight old geriatric Cold War dictatorships loosened up popped this new spirit. But what was it? It wasn't anti-communist, it wasn't communist. What was it? How could you describe it? The Chinese situation, what did they want? The Chinese dictators said, well, they want American capitalism and the running dogs of Wall Street. That's what they want. Well, bullshit. We know that's not right. What those students wanted was they wanted to change their own major. I was talking to some leftists, some liberals at the real liberals, the LA Weekly. Jay Levin's there. Jay said, well, what those Chinese students want, after all, they just want Cadillacs. Well, goddamn right, Jay. They want Cadillacs, they want VWs, they want surfboards, they want soap, they want blue jeans, they want the fucking option to decide how to live their life. They want to select their majors. That's what the whole movement of post-industrial information age, the movement of individualism, is not to leave communism, go to capitalism, or go back to fundamentalist Islamic Christianity. People want to have the choice, the option of deciding how to live their lives. In China, they wanted to be able to date a girl in public. When I say that this political movement, the aim of which is to choose your major, has never happened in human history before, let me demonstrate or try to prove to you why I feel that way. The notion of thinking for yourself, making your own life decisions, navigating your own career throughout your life, of choosing your own wife, of choosing how you want to dress, of choosing where you want to live. Now really, that's pretty recent, as is the notion of progress, for that matter, revolution. Throughout most of human history, the notion of coming before people and say, I want to encourage you young people to think for yourself, was simply out of the question. In a hunter-gatherer society, if I were to go to a New Guinea tribe and say, tribal elders, gather the young people here, I want to urge them to think for themselves, they'd say, what do you mean, man, think for yourself? Choose your major. There's only one major, hunter or gatherer, so I can understand that. However, in 1989, in post-industrial America, if you have 50 million Americans on a full moon, loony Sunday night at Sunday school praying, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. Well, if your Lord and God is a shepherd, I ask you, what does that make you? Bah! Everything has changed. God is no longer a big shepherd. God is no longer the Lord in heaven, the ruler of all the mighty, things like that. The human being is not a sheep. The human being is not a serf. Now, the human being is a worker or a manager. And in the factory assembly line society that we've all grown up through, you're born in a hospital, you're born in a factory, you're born in a little assembly line, and then you're brought home, and then you go off to school, kindergarten, first grade, all the way up, and you're the god of and the prophets of the industrial mechanical age are, of course, engineers, and the good human being. The good human being in industrial society is prompt, dependable, reliable, productive, efficient, and, of course, replaceable as part of the assembly line. The average American household watches television 7.4 hours a day. That means that the average American household sits like vegetoid octopus slugs with their eyeballs sucking out all this information and the noses pressed to an aquarium, which is called the television tube. The average American lives on the other side of the television screen in this digital, imaginary, fantastic Disneyland world. It's much more important to him or her than the real world. The average American feels closer to Bill Cosby or to Dan Rather or to Mickey Mouse than to the neighbors next door. It's awesome, it's scary, it's frightening how real these television... Matter of fact, I've never seen George Bush. He only exists to me as a cluster of electrons on my screen. Matter of fact, I know Mickey Mouse better than I do George Bush. Because everybody's catching on now that who controls the screen controls society, who controls the screen that you look at controls your mind. The upside of that is you have individually got to control what's on the screens that you look at. And within 2 or 3 years, we will have available software and hardware. The hardware will be a glove, which will allow you to move things on the other side of the screen, a helmet with small screens here, so you'll actually be seeing and viewing as though you're on the other side of the screen. Every time you turn here, you're turning around inside the screen. And a little body vest, so that if someone reaches out and strokes you on the other side of the screen, you can feel it here. Get it? So you're wearing your computer. and you are no longer at the aquarium window peering through at what's going on inside Dan Rather and all that shit. You're there.
I started to examine the rising tide of student activism because I knew things were changing. Already in the 2.5 years preceding that, 8,000 students had been arrested on campuses protesting apartheid in South Africa. You have to know that that happened because the media isn't going to tell you. Shantytowns have been constructed on over 100 universities, and 165 have pulled out $6 billion, joining the divestment movement. So I said, I'll bet these activist students, a minority to be sure, are going to get involved in Central America. But there's no draft. So how are they going to do it? They're going to do it when the CIA comes on campus to recruit, because that is the war in Central America in the flesh. And now they're marching, 750 students at Louisiana State University. Did you believe it? Blocking the CIA, 100 in Bowdoin College. University of Mass using the necessity defense, going on trial. The anti-apartheid movement's still there. University of Texas, 16 students didn't do so good last week. Necessity defense, got 3 to 6 months in prison. They call for advice. Dear Abbie, what should we do? And I give them, proud to be called. I mean, there weren't many people that we could use in the 60s. We couldn't go to, you know, the witch hunts of the 50s, World War II. We would have had to go back to the trade union movement in the 30s. It was lost to us. We had the feeling that it was all new. And though you get the names mixed up and you think it was all sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you know that something political happened back then. There is the legacy that you can go out and fight City Hall and you can win. There's about 3,000 students out there right now in America that see themselves as organizers first and students second. They see that is their education. That is part of what they want to do in life. They want to stop apartheid in South Africa. They want to stop the war in Central America. They want to make this country so that it's a country that attends to the problems of the least fortunate, not the most fortunate in the country. And I look at my kid, 16 years old. At 13, he brought down a curfew ban, Seattle, got rock and roll into the park at 14. Now he works on draft resistance. Chained himself to a fence, just like Papa. When I die, he'll inherit the business. I said to him, why are you doing all this? He says, I don't know. We ain't gonna win. Polar ice cap's going to melt, the tropical forest is going to go away, take away our oxygen, AIDS is going to take out half the population, nuclear bombs are going to go off within 7.5 years. I can prove it to you on my computer. I said, wow, where'd you learn how to talk like that? He says, that's just the way it is, that's reality. You're quaint, Daddy, you're a romantic dreamer, something from the past. But he is expressing a certain kind of nihilism that American youth reflect in their music, in their language, the way they dress, in their thoughts, and in their nightmares, certainly. Unattached to the planet, unattached to the past, the present, and especially the future. That's why I say there's a possibility, if you don't go out and make the social changes that were begun in the 60s and weren't finished in the 60s, your nightmares might come true and you will be the last generation that you see in your dreams at night. Change doesn't come about through conformists. People take risks like those 4 students in 1970 that lost their lives right here on this campus, because they didn't believe that the National Guard had a right to come on and shoot at students. They didn't believe that the U.S. government had a right to lie to its people and to send young people 10,000 miles off to battles. Nothing's changed. Same decisions are there. I urge you to think about this. We need young people in the front because young people have creativity, personal computers, energy. They understand MTV. You take somebody my age. I'm 50. I'll be 51 next year. I mean, God, is he old? Older than my father, I heard people say. They tell you you get wise when you get old. You know what you get? You get hemorrhoids. You don't get these ideas and thoughts when you're middle-aged. It's when you're young that you get your ideas, that you can change things. You're plugged into the cultural communications. You have that one ingredient that is necessary for social change that you can't have at middle age or older. Young people are impatient. They want it now. You need that certain element. So I urge you to think about this. We didn't invent the cry of peace and freedom back then. We didn't write its final chapter. Seize this moment. Go out and make tomorrow better than today. I urge you to just say no. Just say no to dorks like Bork who want to bring us back to the 19th century. Just say no to student apathy. Just say no to apartheid in South Africa. Just say no to war in Central America. Say no to Contra-Aid. Just say no. Just say no to lying presidents like Ronald Reagan. All right. And just say no when they ask you to piss in the vial. And don't drop your zipper for the gipper. Right on. Test the government, not the people. That's what democracy is about.
I was just thinking on the way down here, just all these Black Sabbath stories that I had in my head, and the wonder and the beauty of Black Sabbath, how many shitty, hard, fucked times I have been able to just cut my way through with the help of Black Sabbath. Let's think of the merits and the virtues of the band Black Sabbath. I used to live in hell. It was Venice, but I lived in a split-level apartment condo thing with a girl. I was getting rapidly domesticated. I went from king of the jungle, like out playing Rocking the Nation, to putting up fucking Venetian blinds. And like being dragged to stores and this girl going, do you like this color towel for the bathroom or do you want this color towel? I'm like, no, please God help me, you know. No, I'm being domesticated. I mean, fratricide, matricide, homicide, suicide, domesticide. No, not me. And I'm putting up curtains. I'm putting up fucking Venetian blinds. I'm screwing in nice little kitchen lights because this fucking woman wants little lights over the sink. I'm going, you don't need a fucking light. There's a light up in the ceiling. Just put it in. I'm like, I'm like, no, not domesticide, no. So how to get through this shit? You fucking whip out the Sabbath and the girlfriend disappears. Now, rejection, and I don't mean to throw you off, rejection, everyone in this fucking room has been rejected from a person that they wanted to be with. Whatever your circumstance was, every single person in here has some fucked, heart-rending story about how you were like the guy or the girl in love with the other guy or girl or rock or goat or tree or you know, you've been stone cold rejected before. Do you remember how that hurt? I was thinking the ultimate rejection song I could ever think of is Iron Man. There's no wonder why the woman comes home and finds her man with another woman, takes out the family gun and shoots both of them. Because rejection fucking hurts, you know. In the song Iron Man, not only does Iron Man reject the people who he once helped, he kills them all. He destroys all of them. Imagine, Iron Man turned to steel in the great magnetic field. I don't know where that is. But think about Iron Man getting arrested. You know, he just got finished like incinerating Bakersfield, and he's walking back to L.A. going, damn, they fucking rejected me. Now I had my revenge. Because he was stomping them with his heavy boots of lead. He's fucking just killed everyone now. And so he's walking back to L.A. going, fuck these people, man. People suck. I should never even have fucking helped him in the first place. Fucking turned on me, motherfuckers. So the black and white pulls up. It's a sheriff. Hey there, buddy. We got to take you in and ask you some questions. Okay, he gets in the seat. They take him to the police station. Name? Oh, get off it. All right, I'm Iron Man. Look, you filled a lot of people full of dread back there. Yeah, well, I got these boots of lead on. I don't know. So what's the matter? I tried to help these people by, traveling time, and they just fucking rejected me. They just passed me by, and I fucking killed the people I once saved. I'm sorry. Hey, rejection sucks. Okay, well, you are pretty awesome, so I guess we'll let you go. Just cool it, will you? Yeah, all right, No one ever thinks like that about someone like as awesome as Iron Man getting busted. I mean, how many times have you wanted to be like Iron Man? Like when you get your crank yanked at the gas station or at the unemployment office or at the post office, standing in line with a bunch of fucking retards. It would just be like so nice to go. Amazing.
April 15th, 1986, Tax Day. And what a tax day it was. I was up in the attic part of this flat I used to rent. I used to go up the stairs and sleep up there and everything. And I heard this tromping up the stairs. Who could that be? Dun, 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 dun. We're police officers. Dun, 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 dun. What are you doing in my house? Dun da da dun da dun da da. You are under suspicion of trafficking in harmful matter. Harmful matter? What's that? Can you imagine any matter more harmful than finding a cop in your bedroom? And then going on down the stairs into the main part of the place and finding it's not just one cop, not just two cops, not just three cops, not just four, not just five. 9 cops were busy tearing my whole flat to pieces. I felt like it was a DEA drug raid or something, or like I'd walked into one of them William Casey-inspired made-for-TV movies about how the KGB comes in and ransacks Sakharov's apartment and throws his stuff all over the place and runs off with his private mail. Well, there were 2 cops going through my address and phone book page by page, comparing names. I mean, if any of you ever sent me anything and I put you in my book, smile, you're on candid camera now. Since it wasn't just San Francisco cops who were tearing my house to pieces, 3 of the 9 cops were from Los Angeles. I mean, I don't think I have to tell you, they're one of the most violent police forces in America, if not the world. And I was asking, well, what is this harmful matter? Come on, what is this? If you kept me under surveillance half as good as I know you can, you'll know there ain't no drugs in my place. And you'll know there ain't no guns or Uzis under the bed, contrary to Governor George Deukmejian's report about how punk is a gang phenomenon. So I find out that what it takes 9 cops to tear my whole house apart to find the booty, the harmful matter, is a record album. Frankenchrist by my old band Dead Kennedys. And inside that record album was a painting by Swiss surrealist master H.R. Giger. Anybody here not know who Giger is? The guy who won the Oscar for designing the set to Alien and designed the monsters, and he's a recognized master, but they really wanted his ass. I mean, one of the LA guys was going, "Where's the guy who did this painting? Where is he? Where is he?" "He's in Switzerland." I mean, I was scared for my life. I go into the kitchen wondering what's going on, and there's the other LA Vice guy pawing through these promotional copies of the records, some of the records he'd released on Alternative Tentacles. Finds one by the Butthole Surfers. Are you involved with them, too? This was interesting. This was scary. I mean, a 45-year-old LA Vice Squad narc who knew who the Butthole Surfers were? I mean, I don't think it would be because he had hip kids or something. Or could it be some of these cops have been stalking our whole underground scene for a long, long time? So I'm whisked back into the other part of the house where they're going through my mail and going through the address book, and really scared by this time. I mean, I hear the drawers opening and shutting upstairs, not knowing whether they're putting drugs in my clothes or planting a gun there so they say they shot me or self-defense or something like that. I'm plopped down in a chair with nothing but a bathrobe on. Two LA cops are circling around me like sharks. There's one really big, mean one, the meanest one, this Robert Mitchum lookalike, this Robert Mitchum wannabe. He'll get about a year. Somebody shut this guy up so I don't have to listen to him. While the other one is playing good cop, saying, do you like being in a band? Do you make a lot of money? You know, trying to coax information out of me, like who owns the car outside, who owns the building, things like that. Then in comes one of the San Francisco Vice narcs. He's got his Elliot Ness trench coat on and his pinstripes, the whole deal. Kind of an alarmed look on his face, though. He comes in. What are all those pictures of missing milk carton kids doing on your kitchen wall? Do you know where they are? I felt like saying, yeah, I'm John Wayne Gacy, and they're all buried downstairs. So finally, after 2.5 hours of this non-stop terror, and believe me, having that many cops just swarming around you, just waiting for any excuse to pound you or blow your way, it's a subtle form of rape, and boy, do they know it. After about 2.5 hours, they finally, between the 9 of them, they had what they wanted. 3 copies of the Frankenchrist album, 3 extra Giger posters, my private mail, and business ledgers, which they took and then didn't send back later, not even Xeroxes as required by law. And by that time, they'd also raided the Alternative Tentacles and Mordam Records, a little warehouse office space we had, and a couple of the cops were holding up DOA t-shirts showing themselves off, and one of them found the 4x6 chrome slide of the Giger painting we'd gotten from his agent in Switzerland. All right, we got it. This is the smoking gun. We've got it. We've got him now. Forgot to take it with them. But nevertheless, 2 months later, June 2nd, 1986, the day before Election Day, I found out that me and 4 other people were all charged by the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office with 1 count each of distributing harmful matter to minors. They even charged a 67-year-old man whose crime against humanity was owning the record pressing plant that stamped out the vinyl and collated the discs. They even charged him. We were looking at a maximum year in jail, $2,000 fine because of what we said with a record album. This is America?
I really didn't know what was going on all around me during the 60s, but that something was going on was crystal clear. There was the establishment, also known as them, and the freaks, among who I counted myself at my junior age. So I might not have known exactly what we were about, but I knew exactly what we were against. We were against them. That included my parents and teachers. It was us and it was against them. And I knew who they were and I knew whose side I was on. And we were wonderful, I have to admit, we really were. It was inevitable. There had to be a confrontation. There had been occasional flare-ups. Little us against them, violent eruptions here and there, little standoffs. We marched and we protested, and we were marvelous. We were going to win the war. They got the guns, but we got the numbers, right? Wrong. When the confrontation finally came, it was so puny and we were so ill-equipped to deal with it in Chicago, they hit us, and they hit us hard, and they hit us and our faith shattered under the impact. There we were with our peace symbols and our slogans and our banners and our songs and our sandals, and they came at us with their army boots and their guns and their tanks and their batons and their tear gas canisters, and they mowed us down. They hit women and they hit children and they hit men and they hit students and they hit long hairs and short hairs alike. They hit all of us. They hit anything that moved, and we did fall. And then they shot us in Chicago. They killed us where we stood. And we were shocked out of our collectiveness. No, I take it back. We were embarrassed out of it. The confrontation came, and in the face of it, we were wimps. When the big moment finally arrived, and there they were, and there we were, we pussied out. They walked right over us, and we let them because we couldn't fight back, because we lacked the courage and the conviction and the faith. There might have been more of us than them, but the enemy was stronger. The establishment said, okay, we'll make a compromise, but we'll make it on our terms. You can have your long hair and you can have your crazy clothes. You can have your marijuana cigarettes, but you get your candy asses off our streets. We'll end the war, but we'll end it in good time. But it'll be our time, not yours. Now go home. And we went back inside with our goddamn tail between our legs, and it pissed me right off. But nobody wanted any more confrontations. Everybody wanted to let their scars heal. Rest, forget the humiliation, but not Jim Morrison, not him. He'd show him. Nixon got elected, and in front of the whole world, Morrison stood up and called him a fraud. 4 more years of this bullshit, he roared. How much more are you people going to take? He was pissed. He'd do something. The first night of the First Doors national tour, Jim Morrison stood up in a house full of liars and told the truth. He stood on stage, drunk and indignant, in Miami, Florida, and told us exactly what he thought of all of us. You're all a bunch of fucking idiots, he bellowed. Your faces are being shoved into the shit of the world, and you love it. You're all a bunch of fucking slaves. You must like getting pushed around. You must love it. You're all a bunch of idiots. And everyone gasped because Morrison was right, and they knew it. The room was still, but Morrison raged. You didn't come here for music tonight. You didn't come here to hear some good songs, to hear some good musicians. You came here for something else. What do you want me to do? And there's always some smartass who will yell out just the wrong thing at just the right time. And this one yahoo screamed out in front of 15,000 people, "Show us your cock." Morrison was astonished. He blinked into the darkness. "Is that what you want?" he asked, implying, "Is that all?" Because, see, here's the man ready to nail himself to the cross for us, ready to die for us, to wake us up, and all we want is to see the Lizard King's dingle. We weren't only wimps, we were fools. We didn't deserve Jim Morrison anymore. He wasn't only ahead of his time, we weren't in step with ours anymore. To ask whether or not Jim whipped it out in Miami is irrelevant. It's also stupid. It's besides the whole point. Whatever Morrison did that night in Miami, he did for us, and he was arrested for it, and he went on trial for it. And rock and roll went on trial with him. Now they'll see. Now we'll get some results, I thought. I mean, the man can't bust our music, right? Right. That's the last thing they could touch. It was the last thing they touched, and they put their dirty, pudgy, nicotine-stained fingers all over it. Rock and roll went on trial, and nobody cared. Nobody gave a fuck. Jim Morrison and the Doors fought in court with their own money to change the morality laws and the freedom of expression laws, and nobody came. Nobody listened. It was sickening. It was pathetic. No, apathetic is what it was. As most Doors fans know, Miami was the first and last date on a tour where the rest were either canceled by city officials are aborted. Each of the Doors escaped, flying to a different island in the Bahamas. Then one at a time they returned back to Los Angeles to estimate the damage, to try and sort out what had happened and plot out their next move. Everyone was still having trouble that this had really happened in America. When Morrison came back, he found a warrant issued for his arrest waiting on his desk. He announced he was going to turn himself into the FBI, an act I considered nothing short of heroic. We all braced for the after effects, still having difficulty. This was really happening here. Jim hadn't wanted to really tour in the first place. Had this been his way of sabotaging the whole thing? Had his effort worked too well, or had it backfired? Had he let things finally and perhaps irrevocably get out of control? The night of the day that Jim surrendered, I was back at our family house in Westchester, sitting at the dinner table. At dinner, I announced to the gathering how Jim had turned himself in. For what? What'd the freak do this time? My stepfather demanded, since he didn't know how to ask anything nicely. I took a deep breath and with pride, to the best of my 14-year-old ability, recited the charges I only vaguely understood. The misdemeanors were public drunkenness, public profanity, and inciting a riot, I said. And the felonies were lewd and lascivious behavior and simulating masturbation and oral copulation. Those were the felonies. The misdemeanors I sort of grasped, but the felonies really had me quite baffled. I thought simulation meant like a drawing or a cartoon. And I thought oral copulation meant saying fuck, oral meaning mouth and vocal and all. Not in front of the girls, my stepfather yelled, whacking the table, doing the old silverware jump again. He meant his daughters. I didn't know that. Yeah, the girls in front of the boys, the whole audience, the cops too, I said. Young man, you have one filthy mouth and you will leave this table pronto. No, I tried to explain. I didn't say anything. Jim said it. I wasn't even there. As the trial began and the months dragged on, you could see the change in Morrison physically as the realization dawned on him that we weren't simply worth the trouble anymore. We weren't worth the effort or the price. Morrison grew a beard. He put on weight, and the leather pants didn't go back in a closet. They went into the trash this time. Fuck you, he said. You don't deserve the effort. He gave up. He gave up on you, and he gave up on me. But most frighteningly of all, he gave up on himself. And I could do nothing but watch and try and stay out of the way.
I awakened in a pool of mild chemical reaction. I stood up then in the darkness and felt what it was drain slowly from my ankles and fingertips. It felt like thousands of lesser hands weaving small flags beneath my skin. The darkness of the room hummed like a small machine. There was a thin red glow shining from the walls. I turned and noticed some strips of fluorescent light outlining a doorway. Felt along there for a switch. There was a button instead shaped like a V. I saw I was in a photographer's darkroom. The liquid I had woken in now almost totally dissolved across my skin. It must have been some agent used in the developing process. I searched over myself to check for damaging effects. There were no burns apparently, though my veins glowed a metallic silver. I ran my forearms under some warm water, but it only seemed to sharpen the effect. I figured I'd come back to it later. I began to take a look around. I found a drawer in a metal cabinet with my lover's name on it. I forced the lock and withdrew the contents, a box of color slides she had once taken of her ex-husband. There was a dozen of them, each with the same pose of him leaning naked against the trunk of a lavender Bentley. They obsessed me immediately. I emptied them into my jacket pocket and returned the box to the drawer, leaving it open. Pushed another V-shaped button and took an 8-seat jet back to the city. I never liked this man. I once read in my lover's diaries the methods he used in bed to please her. What I read haunted me many months. It reached such a clarity beneath my eyes when I lay beside her in the darkness that for 16 weeks I could not bring myself to touch her skin. It forced her to return to him each Sunday morning, and when I discovered this, I led her out one evening to the beryllium flats and with a shovel dug a place for her to rest. When the time came that I wanted her back, I realized that she had many months before forgotten how to breathe. I know guitar voodoo. I learned it from a woman with white hair in the hills above Kingston, who all day slit open the crowns of oranges and raised them above her head for the sun to drink. At night, one day each month, she gathered the dry, pale skins and mounds and left them for the full moon to push back beneath the earth. This cycle gave her great powers, and because I one day taught her the proper way to sharpen the blade on her knife, she gave some power to me. She opened the case of my guitars and placed 6 fingertips of the pickups beneath the strings. She made a tea from the dried orange leaves on the fire and taught me the way of guitar voodoo. When I got to my apartment with the photographs that night, I placed them in a plain glass bowl. I lifted from the dresser the porcelain sphere the white-haired mistress had given me 1 year past. I knew that this was the time. The scent from the thick golden substance inside was sweet and true, like a child breathing. This was a byproduct of what the sun itself had one day left behind for me. With my adrenaline rising, a slow heat turned like a fist beneath my heart. My hands tightened for the power. I poured the substance into the bowl over the squares of processed celluloid containing his image. When the last drop rolled out, I put down the sphere, and though it served no purpose for the ceremony, I danced 1 hour before I slept. By the time I woke the next morning, the magic was already complete. I went to the living room sofa, I took the slides from the bowl and laid them in 2 rows of 6 across the glass tabletop. I raised the bowl to my lips and drank what was left over. Opened the closet door and removed my guitar from its case. Turned the power on with the switch on the amp and hooked the jacks. I shut my eyes as a potion took me over. There were small globes, the color of burst capillaries, framed by an uncertain gravity before a white expanse. Then an image began to focus. I could see, clearly as the sun, the man who was my lover's husband lying in bed in his home in Northern California. He was just waking. Some shadows of morning light hung from the brass bedpost. He was sitting up now beneath a fancy quilt with his eyes fully open. I took one of the Voodoo slides, turned rigid by the potion overnight, and fingering on the neck of the guitar, an A chord, ran his naked, obscene image like a guitar pick across the strings. I saw the reaction as if standing behind a mirror right in his bedroom. His body shuddered violently on the bed. He seemed to be pulled a few inches off the mattress until the sound finally quit reverberating inside the amp. The room was left with a hollow ringing within silence, like air inside a nitrous oxide dream. He gripped his convulsing and stopped it. His eyes searched the room for answers. He checked some objects on top of the bookshelves, praying with moving lips that something had been knocked over to sustain his hope that there was an earthquake taking place, that there was a natural explanation for all this. But nothing was moved. I was delirious with pleasure. I upped the volume of the amp to 8 and ran the Voodoo image across the strings windmill style like Pete Thompson. He was thrown back across the floorboards as if the force of a giant reptile's tail across his neck. I couldn't figure out if the Voodoo force worked from outside his body or within. More likely both, I imagine. He quivered on his back and implored the ceiling. On his bare chest, 6 lines of blood, thin as guitar strings, opened and pulsed. I looked down and noticed the red draining down my own fingers' crevices 3,000 miles away. The magic was transporting his blood to me. I thought a moment to stop it, but it was out of my control. I slammed into another G chord. I saw this woman run into his room and gape in astonishment. When I saw her hands clapped tight across her ears, I realized that he must have been screaming out my guitar chord from deep inside his lungs with the same volume produced by my guitar and amp, his larynx about to shatter like a crystal goblet. More chords. He slammed against the 4 walls. He was weakened. My power was growing stronger. I didn't want it any longer, but his fingers clutched his throat for the pain. Each uncontrolled shriek was causing. The veins along his forearms were throbbing and choking each other like killer vines. The woman bolted from the room, signing herself at the cross. I realized it was beginning to do him in. The building tension of the strings at E forced the lines of blood across his chest to spurt like steam from split valves. Vengeance was a wasted thing, I thought. It was bringing sounds from within him which human tissue was incapable of bearing. I slapped my hand across the pickups to snuff the sound. I wiped the sweat and blood from the glass tabletop and leaned over to switch off the power in the amp. There was the last image of his body dropping limp and unconscious to the stunned floorboards of the room. I opened my eyes, I undid my belt buckle, and I slept for days. Thank you. Night.